Which mage weapon should you use in Hypixel Skyblock? Honestly, it's a pretty valid question considering there is quite a lot of choice. Unlike melee weapons, with mage weapons, majority of them actually do different things, which to be honest makes it even more difficult for our simple brains to make a choice. Well, today we'll do a side-by-side comparison of majority of the usable mage weapons in Hypixel Skyblock, and hopefully it'll be a little bit more easier for you to come to a decision as to which one to use. We're going to start off with the lower tier weapons all the way up to the best. So let's get to it. And first of all, we're starting off with the Dreadlord Sword, the classic early game starter mage weapon. Pretty much the first mage weapon that anyone will ever get when they're actually going down the route of mage. Now, to make it easier, it'd probably be easier just to show you what it does rather than explain. If you right click when you have it, it shoots like a skull and that then does damage. So like there we did 104k damage, although obviously with less mana and less ability damage, that figure will change. Its ability has no cooldown, so it's ideal to spam, and considering that the mana cost of the ability is really quite cheap, you can just spam and spam and spam. And for a starter weapon, it's quite good, and there's not really anything else to say. If you go into early dungeon floors, this is the weapon that you'll see all the time, and it's understandable why. Now moving on to the Golem Sword. Now this is an interesting one because I'm not sure if I've ever actually used it. But to me, it's basically like a baby version of the Yeti Sword. And its right click ability punch the ground damaging enemies in a hexagon around you for 25 seconds, base mage magic damage, mana cost of 63 on a cooldown of 3 seconds. So let's demonstrate. So we right click. It's actually not bad. I mean, it doesn't do a lot of damage, but at early game, depending on what you're trying to kill, I mean, that's not horrible. Now, what is obviously what sets most mage weapons apart is its cooldown, and the fact that it's on a 3-second cooldown, yeah, is a little bit annoying. Now, unfortunately, it isn't dungeonizable, so if you're early game and need a mage setup, and it's not for dungeons, it's not a horrible option. Before we go any further, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, as it gets yourself 5% off. You should join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer slays and dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Also, if you're not already, you should subscribe to the channel. And the next weapon we're taking a look at is the Fire Free Staff. Now, I never said all of these weapons are good. Its right-click ability creates a circle with a radius of 5 blocks. After 5 seconds, all mobs inside are frozen for 10 seconds. Mana cost of 450, which is quite steep, on a cooldown of 10 seconds. Okay, so let's test it. If we right-click, we have to wait 5 seconds, and then all mobs are frozen for 10 seconds. Yeah, it's not the greatest. I can imagine it could be decent in some pretty niche situations. However, the fact that you have to wait 5 seconds and it's only a 5 blocks radius, yeah, I don't know about that. Something I do want to try is once you've right-clicked, can you actually move? No, it doesn't actually change the area, so if they run out of the circle, yeah, it doesn't do anything. Yeah, I think we go next. Now, the next weapon is the Aspects of the Dragons, and you might be thinking, hey, I think you've got this a bit mixed up. The Aspects of the Dragons is a melee weapon, and it's a decent melee weapon at the start of the game. However, it's also not too bad as a mage weapon, surprisingly. Considering its right-click ability means that all monsters in front of you take 22.9k damage, hit monsters take large knockback. And I remember back in the day, I can't remember who made the video, but this was way back in the day. The Aspects of the Dragons was actually featured in a fake Hyperion, like a budget Hyperion video, whereby you would basically use an Aspects of the Dragons alongside an Aspect of the End and switch between the two. And if you wanted to basically use your Hyperion, in quotation marks, you would right-click, and then that's kind of how it goes. It's not that bad, I've got to say. The mana cost isn't crazy, and it doesn't have a cooldown, which is actually quite nice. Also, they take a ton of knockback, and yeah, you can just kind of spam it. It is not the worst weapon in the game. I've got to lie. I can't lie for being a mage weapon. And this is without enchantments. You've got to think, like, if you have this geared and you have heroic on it and so on, it'll do a bit more damage. I'm not saying it's a game changer. Moving on. Actually, before we do move on, it is also dungeonizable, so it was actually used in dungeons too. Anyway, moving on to a slightly more modern weapon, and that is the Fire Veil Wand. And who doesn't love the Fire Veil Wand? At 5.6, like 5-6 million coins, it's pretty good. Its right-click ability creates a veil of fire around you for 5 seconds, dealing 46.9k damage per second to mobs within. Mana cost of 135 and a cooldown of 1 second. Now, it just is quite good. I'll demonstrate how it works. If we right-click, basically all the mobs in this radius just get nuked. And it does quite a lot of damage as well. If you're looking 870k damage, that's really not that bad. Like if we take this test to the Crimson Isles and test it against these magma cubes that have 400k health, they're all going to get one-tapped. I mean, of course, your setup determines how much damage you're going to deal, but it's really not bad at all. Now, a good thing is as well, is the cooldown is shorter than the amount of time that it takes for the ability to wear off, meaning that, in theory, as long as you've got the mana, it's unlimited. 1 second cooldown and it lasts for 5 seconds. This is a really, really, really good weapon, especially for the price. Now, unfortunately, it isn't dungeonizable. However, you can star it to make it deal more damage, which is good as well. Now, next up, we have the Fire Fury Staff, which is also another really good weapon. Now, let's have a look at its right-click ability. It shoots a projectile that, on impact, creates a firestorm, dealing up to 1.3 million damage over 10 seconds to mobs in a 7-block radius, on a cost of 900 on a cooldown of 20 seconds. So, it's not massively dissimilar to the Fire Veil Wand, although at the same time it is, considering it's more of a ranged weapon with a, well, bigger damage value and also a much longer cooldown. But let's go ahead and give this a test. So let's right click, and then anything that steps in this area for 10 seconds is going to take the damage, which is 495k, which is actually pretty decent, especially if you're trying to kill like a group of mobs somewhere. Maybe if you're fishing, if you're barn fishing, I don't know, it's got quite a lot of uses. It's a decent weapon, and at the cost of about 5 million coins, it's really not too bad. Now, the order of these weapons got a little bit muddled up, considering I wouldn't say that the Fire Veil or Fire Fury are worse than the Aurora Staff, but I feel like we should talk about the Aurora Staff anyway. Its right-click ability fires a beam of energy, hitting the first enemy on its path for 221k damage, deals reduced damage past 10 blocks. So, it's a ranged weapon, but it's not. A bit of a strange one. Let's give it a quick test. 820k damage, let's get a bit further away. We then deal 737k damage. So it is, yeah, the reduction does work. It's not a bad weapon at all. Its mana cost is low at 10 seconds. It's only got a 1 second cooldown. Now, it's definitely not bad as an earlier game weapon. The cooldown can get a little bit annoying, but the damage is really not that bad, to be honest. Like I said, the order got a bit muddled up, and now we have the Bonso Staff. For those of you who don't know, the right-click ability shoots balloons that create a large explosion at impact, dealing up to 22k damage. It's got a mana cost of 81, and it's got no cooldown. So let's give it a go. Let's right-click. Maybe we could hit. There we go. 79. So does it need to actually be... does it actually do... Okay, so it doesn't have to be direct impact. I've not used this weapon for so long. It doesn't deal that much damage. It's good early game dungeons because it's dungeonizable. But other than that, I'd probably skip on the Bonso Staff. Another good thing about the Bonso Staff, though, is that it can kind of... When you actually shoot the balloons, if you shoot them down at the floor or at a certain angle, it can kind of throw you in a certain sort of... in a certain direction. It's hard to explain. I'm sure most of you know what I mean, because most people have used the Bonso Staff. So it has got other uses just than being a mage weapon, which I guess is kind of cool. But for a weapon alone, it's not the greatest. Okay, now moving on to the heavier hitters per se, we have the Yeti Sword. Now, the Yeti Sword's right-click ability shows a chunk of terrain in the direction you are facing, deals up to 531k damage. Has a mana cost of 113 on a cooldown of 1 second. It also can be converted to a dungeon item and starred as well, so that's nice to see. And it also does have some gemstone slots, which is also good. Now, let's see how this works. Can't lie, it's not a weapon that I've used all that much. But I believe the best way to use it is if you just face straight down as if you're using a hype, and then right click. I think that's the best way of doing it, because when you start to get into range situations, it becomes a bit more inconsistent, because a lot of the time you miss, or I miss anyway. But it's not bad at all. It's going to deal around about 2 million damage for me. Will probably be different damage for you. And it's quite a big damaging figure, to be honest, for 27 million coins. Now, of course, the annoying thing about this weapon is the cooldown. You can't just spam it, and if you could, it would literally just be very similar to a Hyperion. I mean, with its right-click damaging ability, not of the rest. But, yeah. It's not a bad weapon, and honestly, it's not really a bad price. It will deal a decent amount of damage, it can hit multiple enemies at once. Yeah, it's not bad at all. Now moving on to the Glacial Scythe. Now, the Glacial Scythe is a direct upgrade from the Frozen Scythe, but I think it makes more sense just to test the Glacial one because it is just better. Its right-click ability shoots one Ice Bolt that deals 53k damage and slows enemies hit for 5 seconds when hitting the ground. Also creates an explosion of 3 blocks dealing the same damage. Mana cost of 34 with no cooldown. It does have a gemstone slot, and it is, of course, fraggable, which this one is. It is relatively expensive for what it is at the same time, though being 50 million coins, but you've got to keep in mind the mana cost. Of course, I've got Ultimate Wise on here, and it's only 34, but 34 for a weapon that you can completely spam, it's not bad. No. Let's see what sort of damage I deal. 275k, 277, yeah, around about 270 to 280k. And then if we go to the Crimson Isles, we'll see how quickly we can take out these magma cubes. It should be pretty good. It should just be a 2-hit, yeah, which it is. But all in all, it's actually not that bad. The next weapon we're going to compare it to is what most people compare it to, so it should be interesting to see. I do want to say as well that, you know, all of these weapons have different levels of enchantments on them and stuff like that, so I wouldn't really be paying too much attention to the damage. It's more what the weapons actually do, and you can tell the difference between the damage anyway. And on to the next is the Spirit Scepter. Now, its right-click ability shoots a guided spirit bat following your aim and exploding for 5,000 damage. Mana cost of 180 with no cooldown, however, with Ultimate Wise, the mana cost would be 90. But even with the mana cost being 90, just a quick comparison to the Glacial Scythe, what this means is that the Glacial Scythe still costs less than half of the mana of the Spirit Scepter, which just means that you're able to spam it more. Now, I'm going to test this weapon first, of course. And this isn't going to be an accurate damage comparison to the Glacial Scythe because this has enchantments and this doesn't. And our damage is around about 160k. Now this is slightly different to the Glacial Scythe, considering once you right click you can actually move your aim and the bat will move, which is kind of cool. And what I will say is the Spirit Scepter with the same enchantments as the Glacial Scythe does do more damage, simple as, although it does consume a lot more mana. Now, if you have a lot of mana and decent mana regeneration, it's not going to make too much of a difference, considering, you know, it's not a massive amount of mana to lose on each right click if you've got good mana regen. This weapon is substantially cheaper at 13 mil as opposed to 50. It's strange because I think that the cheaper weapon is better at later game and the more expensive weapon is actually better at early game. Kind of not how you would expect it to be. But both solid weapons, the Spirit Scepter has been for a while and always will be a great weapon. Both of the weapons are dungeonizable too, so keep that in mind. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Midas Staff, the best one-hit damaging mage weapon in the game. Well, this one definitely won't be, but a maxed out one is crazy good for damage. Now, its right-click ability, cast a wave of molten gold in the direction you are facing, deals up to 66.7k damage. Mana cost of 225, that's with Ultimate Wise, so usually it would be 450 on a cooldown of 1 second. It is dungeonizable, and of course, the more you pay for this weapon in the Dark Auction, the more damage it deals. Now, 33 mil paid is not a lot, meaning that this damage should be taken with a pinch of salt. Now, let's go ahead and test it. 3 million damage. Yeah. 3 million damage from Midas Staff with my gear is really quite mid. If you were to buy a fully upgraded one, for example this one right here, you can see that it will deal up to 1.2 million damage on a right click, as opposed to 657k damage on a right click. With this Midas Staff, I would be confident that you could probably hit over 10 million damage per hit, which is kind of crazy. And the main thing what lets this weapon down is definitely the cooldown. If it didn't have the cooldown, it would be definitely comparable to a Hyperion. And then ultimately, we have the Hyperion, which needs no introduction with 3 scrolls on. It is as good as it gets, to be completely honest. Now, I have to say, for the whole video, I haven't had an Implosion Belt on, I haven't had a Gauntlet of Contagion on, hence why my damage is really, really mid. And to my realisation, I've been using the Ghoul Pet for the whole video as well, rather than the G-Drag, but this doesn't really matter. With any weapon that deals explosive damage, make sure to always use an Implosion Belt as you deal 25% extra damage. Don't take after me. Now, what's great about the Hyperion is when you have 3 scrolls on it. Without 3 scrolls on it, it's nothing to write home about. But when you put the 3 scrolls on it, they all combine to make the Wither Impact, which means that you can teleport 10 blocks ahead of you, so basically it's an aspect of the Void. It basically explodes, dealing 344k damage to nearby enemies. Also applies the Wither Shield Scroll ability, reducing damage taken and granting Absorption Shield for 5 seconds. All in all, it makes to be the best weapon in the game, and if you don't have one and you're thinking about getting one and you're grinding towards one, definitely keep the grind up and get one. It's worth it, trust me. That wraps it up. That isn't every single mage weapon in the game. However, I feel like they're probably the most used ones, maybe with the exception of a couple. Some are better value for money than others, some are essential, some aren't, some are good at early game, some are good at mid game, some are good at late game, some are good at end game. You name it, but that is pretty much that. You can make your mind up which one you want to buy, or if you were going to buy one or not, you can then decide if you want to. But anyway, that's all for today. If you have enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.